I'm going to just improv this page and discuss it. It's pretty big. This is actually really an overview of what this entire book is about. So, we are talking about the very fluid states of being, inner divinity, or outer focus, inner dissociation. So, you're either ID or of ID. Now, each one of these acronyms applies two different ways. So, in inner divinity, when you are plugged into your GPS, you are plugged into your internal guiding, perceiving spirit. Whereas when you're in a state of inner dissociation, you are plugged into the outer guided preference system, or OGPS. Kind of like, oh, GPS, where are you taking me? So if you think about it, if your whole life is about the preferences or the standards outside of you and living up to those preferences and standards outside of you so that you can get the love or acceptance or survival needs required for your life, unfortunately, it's not coming from internal. So even if you receive what you need, it still doesn't mean that it's going to align and make you feel congruent with life. In inner divinity, you are always the CEO of your life, regardless of what state you are in, because the very limited control anyone has is their conscious will, which focuses attention. So that is the limited control you have over your consciousness. And even that can be disrupted from things outside of yourself that can really kind of take over, like a survival threat. So when you are in inner divinity, you are a conscious embodied observer. When you are in inner dissociation, you are trying to control life. You feel entitled to your preferences, and you feel that you have a sense of ownership, not just for yourself, but for other people in your life, the materials in your life, and on and on. And this is a very big concept. It can be difficult for people to understand that they don't even own themselves on a very philosophical and molecular level. So we're going to get into that more over time. Just try and keep an open mind and notice in what ways you're like, no, I absolutely don't agree with that. Remember, it's okay to be diverse. It's okay to see things different. In fact, it's very important to run everything by your own set of principles as you're learning to align with your internal guiding perceiving spirit. So the orientation is very different in inner divinity than it is in of ID. And of course, survival needs are a very big deal. This is why the first part of this book is all about restoring your internal resources. And part 2 of this book is all about coming into unity with external resources required for survival needs and universal values for humanity. So IOU, when you're in inner divinity, you are just in a state of inner-outer unity. Whereas when you're of ID, you are in a state of I owe you, you owe me. Everything's very competitive. Again, we absolutely are competing for our survival needs, so that comes from a very deep place inside. But more than that, it's just this belief that you need to prove and earn your worth, prove and earn that you are loving or lovable. And whenever you're trying to prove, it's because you don't believe you have it, right? Like, I don't have to prove something that I know. I can just know. And if somebody else disagrees with me, it's like, that's fine, kind of like this whole book. Like, this is my knowing from my life experience, and you may or may not agree. And I'm very open to expanding my understanding and perspectives, but I also run them by my own set of internal values and through my own conscious. I don't just accept the outside just because it's there. I allow it, I observe it, but how far I allow it to impact me is just depends, right? So now in inner divinity, we have this orientation kind of towards the present and the future, as we do in inner dissociation. When you're in inner divinity, you're in a state of self-trust. Boundaries happen naturally because you are in a state of self-trust. And we're going to talk about boundaries in terms of another acronym called AND, access, nature, depth. We'll go deeply into that. And then distribution it's very, very important. It requires a lot of self-awareness because it means that you're going to consciously get your needs met. So you do know that you're going to have to distribute your energy. No one person has everything they need to survive. And no matter how independent you are, your life is still a co-creation with others because you are dependent on resources outside of yourself that others cultivate. So trust boundaries distribution is when you are in a conscious embodied observer state. You're trusting yourself, you're in the present moment, and so you're just fluid with it, flowing. Whereas total body darkness is the of ID inner dissociation. And the reason for this is they're not listening to their body and the cues of their body. And even when they are, it's more attached to the conscious mind's storyline. And the story of the conscious mind is not accurate to reality often. It is very often accurate to conditioning that is impacting the whatever's being perceived in reality. So when you're in total body darkness, you're not trusting yourself, you don't trust the world, you're not listening to your body or your cues. You're really kind of just doing what you should, and I'm putting that in quotes, what you should do. So now let's move on to the next, because this is how you're going to be focusing your energy and time. When you're in inner divinity, you are cultivating practices that you love. And so you're putting your energy, focus, and time into that which you love. Whereas when you're in inner dissociation, you are cultivating whatever you feel that you need to be acceptable to the outside world. And that can be a really stressful, pressure-ridden experience that diminishes you. And in fact, it kind of reminds me of like Carol Dweck. She wrote a book called Mindset. She talks about the fixed and growth mindset. So in this sense, of ID, inner dissociation would very much be the fixed mindset. It's kind of like things are happening to you and you don't necessarily even have the tools or know how to fix it. So you just give up. You go into the problem state, the passive reactive obedience, rather than trying to shift towards what you love with your energy, focus, and time. And this is because also in inner divinity, you don't necessarily know what you love or cultivate what you love. You cultivate what you think other people will love, so they'll love you. So it's when you're in this state of trying to be love instead of just being the state of love. Okay, lastly, but not lastly, is LID. And in inner divinity, this stands for loves in diversity. So when you are strong and you have core values and you are strong in yourself, diversity is fun. It's exciting. You want people to be different than you. In fact, it can even be annoying if somebody is too similar to you or is mimicking you or copying you, because you want the differences. You love diversity. It's safe to be different than other people, and you understand that it is those differences which create such a full experience of life. And if you run into anything that you don't like, you know that you can just shift away from it. And we go deeply into that in chapters 2 and 3. And 4. Okay, so the other orientation would be lives in division. So when you are in a state of outer focus, inner dissociation, everything is a competition. And this is just true in part because of the way our society is structured for survival needs not being met. But it's more than that. It's even when you see somebody that's doing something that you like, instead of being able to support and love them for that, it creates this division within yourself, and you actually, project a lot of negativity out into the world. So lives in division is because it's scary to be in diversity when you don't have a strong sense of self, when you don't know what your own worth and values are. That can be difficult to be out in the world in that way. It can be scary. So obviously this is like a lot. We're going to be diving into this the rest of the book. And this was my little just free flow. So I hope it made sense. I'm sure it made enough sense. And let's move on to the rest of chapter 1.